If you've ever found yourself feeling overly anxious and worrying a lot, it's very uncomfortable. It can be quite debilitating. Perhaps you've been thinking over and over again, how can I get rid of this anxiety? But most likely you don't even really understand what's triggering it. So in this video, we're going to talk more about 3 tools that you can use starting today that can help you reduce your level of anxiety and worry and help you feel better about yourself and your life. Now is always the time to start making positive changes in your life. Dr. Donna, Leigh Bliss here. On this channel, I promote optimal mental health and well-being to help you become the best version of yourself. If there are any topics you would like me to make a video on, please let me know in the comment section below. Anxiety, worrying, overthinking, ruminating, those are very common issues that new clients present when I see them for therapy. So in this video, you're going to learn more about really where the anxiety and the worrying comes from, but most importantly, about 3 tools that you can use to start reducing your level of anxiety and worrying today. Stick around to the end because I have a bonus resource that will make this even more helpful for you. We are emotional beings. For whatever reason, we have feelings: happy, mad, sad, glad. We tend to label them as positive or negative, but feelings just are what they are. They're a barometer on how we're coping with life, how we're connecting with other people. And in my experience, trying to get rid of feelings actually makes them stronger. So in order to try to understand why we feel anxious, we actually tell ourselves stories. I'm anxious because my boss has not been happy with my work and he might reprimand me or fire me. Or I'm anxious because my girlfriend is being a little distant and I wonder if she's going to break up with me. Or somebody might say, I'm anxious because when I look at my phone and I see all the bad news in the world, I just feel so overwhelmed. I just want to hide in a hole. So we tell ourselves these stories to try to help explain to ourselves why we feel a certain way. The interesting thing is that while we all do that, frequently these stories have nothing to do with why we feel the way we feel. So when I work with clients and I ask them why they feel anxious, they typically talk about external circumstances, and as if that is what's making them feel a certain way. But the reality is that's not true. One of the things that's really important to understand, and probably the most important point I can emphasize, is that what generates our feelings is our interpretations of what's going on around us. Oftentimes these interpretations, the meaning we ascribe to something, is outside of our conscious awareness. It's quite automatic. And so when somebody says I'm anxious because of what's happening in the world, they actually believe that. But somebody else may look at the same set of circumstances and not feel anxious. So here's a really great example I learned a long time ago about understanding about the power of interpretation and feelings. Let's say that you and 2 friends are going to a football game. Your one friend really likes Team A and doesn't like Team B. Your second friend really likes Team B and doesn't like Team A, so there's a bit of a rivalry. But you're going because you just want to hang out with your friends, so you don't really care about the football game and who wins and loses. So after the game is over, you are at a coffee shop and your friend that likes Team A is really excited. And the waitress comes over and says, my goodness gracious, you're in a great mood. What happened? And your friend says, my team won the football game. We beat Team B. And this person is clearly excited. Then she looks at your other friend who seems down in the dumps. This is your friend that was rooting for Team B. She said, well, boy, you don't seem very happy. What happened? He said, Team A won. I was rooting for Team B. It's the worst thing in the world. And so now your second friend is explaining why he's feeling the way he's feeling, in this case a little bit down, because of his interpretation of the football game. His team lost. And then the waitress looks at you and she says, you don't seem to be either excited or depressed. And you say, I went to the football game, but I don't really care who wins. I was just happy to hang out with my friends. So think about it. Here are 3 very different emotional reactions to the exact same event, a football game. And so what is causing the emotional reaction isn't the football game. It's the meaning it has for somebody. And so when somebody has got this emotional investment that their team has to win, or they have to get a promotion at work, or an election has to turn out a certain way, and it doesn't, they may then be depressed or anxious or upset. And so one of the things when I work with clients is I talk about it's really important to start to understand and see how you're interpreting an event, because your interpretation is what's causing your emotional reaction, not the event. So here are 3 tools that can help you start to reduce your level of anxiety, worry, and overthinking. 1, be aware of your worldview. We grew up in a social world with other people. And so we took cues from our parents and other adults about how to see the world. Perhaps you grew up in a fear-based family where your parents were not trusting. You know, the kind of family that says you can't trust anybody but your family. Or maybe they had a more cynical view. Or maybe they were more optimistic. So the point is, as you were growing up, you were developing a worldview, sort of a general theme about how to see the world, and you didn't even know it. And chances are, as an adult, you still don't see it. You just think that's the way the world is. The reality is, nobody has a clearly objective, accurate perspective of reality. There's research on eyewitnesses and crimes. We think, gosh, an eyewitness, that's the best kind of evidence. But yet the research shows people will see the exact same event and see it differently. So they can see it through their own worldview of being cynical, of being more trusting, of being naive. And when you start to see your worldview, you start to understand how that really prepares you to start interpreting the world. So if you're pessimistic, you're probably going to be the kind of person that says the glass is half empty. If you're optimistic, you say the glass is half full. Now that's an oversimplification, because our views aren't just one way or the other. But generally speaking, in my experience working with clients, people tend to have rather stable worldviews, and the ones that are more fear or shame-based or cynical or untrusting are the ones that tend to be associated with higher levels of anxiety and depression and just really not feeling good about yourself and your life. The second tool to help reduce your level of anxiety is to focus on what you have control over versus what you don't. So think about it. As human beings, we live in a world filled with uncertainty. We don't know what the weather's going to be like. Bad things happen, accidents, people die, unforeseen events happen, good ones and bad ones. And yet, despite that uncertainty, we actually have very little control over what happens outside of ourselves. We can try to control our attitudes and actions, but at best we can try to influence external circumstances. So let's say you are going to vote in an election and you think your candidate has to win, and you just get all worked up about it. Obviously, you can't control the election. The only control you have is over who you choose to vote for. And when millions of other people are voting, your one vote may not seem very much. So we have this challenge then of how do we exercise control over what we have and let go of trying to control things that we actually can't control. My experience has been most of the time anxiety is caused by believing or wanting to control something, usually something outside of ourselves, a lot of times other people, and believing that if we can't control that, our life is going to be terrible. So we start generating anxiety. So the second tool is pretty simple to do. Start to think in terms, in any given situation, what you have control over, what you can do. So if you're afraid of what's happening in the world, can you do anything about it? Chances are you can't change the world, but maybe you can be a kinder person, or practice better self-care, or start doing hobbies that you wanted to do, or making positive changes in your life. So focusing on what we can have control over and letting go of what we don't have control over is a really powerful tool that can help reduce your level of anxiety and worry. Related to that is tool number 3, which is really focusing on what's happening now versus future tripping, as I call it, projecting into the future negative, fearful scenarios. So let's say you find yourself ruminating over and over again about, oh my God, what if I get laid off? The economy's bad. I don't know how I'm going to be able to take care of myself. Now, getting laid off can happen. It does happen to people. But chances are it's not going to happen. So one of the things to ask yourself is that happening now? And most of the time, the answer is no. Well, how can you control anything that's not happening? You can't. So all you end up doing is ruminating, just churning through fear and anxiety over and over and over again without any resolution. No wonder you're anxious all the time. That is exhausting. So when we start focusing on what's going on now, we're in a better position to start to look at what we do have control over. So we'll go back to the example of being afraid of being laid off. What can you do about it now? You might think, I could work at being a more reliable employee. I can volunteer to help my boss out. I can be friendlier to people. Now, those strategies sound pretty good. Do they guarantee you won't get laid off? Of course not. But they also increase the likelihood that if layoffs are going to happen, your boss might say, oh, I don't want to get rid of Joe because Joe's just been really, really helpful. So when we start to really focus on what's going on now, we're much more empowered to take action to try to influence a certain situation. But the reality is most of the things we worry about are based in the future, could happen, but most of the time don't happen. And even if they do happen, we can cope with them. So let's say that you do get laid off. Is that the end of the world? Are you going to become homeless? Will you starve to death? Will all your friends abandon you? Of course not. That's ridiculous. It might be difficult, but you would survive. So shifting your focus from the future to the present basically says there's no point in being anxious about a reality that hasn't happened yet, that might not happen, and even if it does, I'll be able to cope with it. So tool 3, along with the first 2 tools in combination, can really help you get grounded more and more in what you have control over versus what you don't, focusing on how you can exercise your control, which is only in the present moment. We can't control the past, we can't control the future. And when you start understanding your worldview, you can start seeing how you've been setting yourself up to feel anxious. And so maybe you start changing your worldview to be a bit more positive, a bit more optimistic, and that in itself already starts to relieve some of the anxiety you've been feeling. I encourage you to try these tools out. They're very, very powerful. I've worked with many clients over the years, and they make a huge difference. So as a bonus, there is a wonderful book that I've actually been reading now that speaks to the issues I've been talking about, and it's just chock full of great ideas and tools that you can use to help yourself in terms of reducing anxiety and ruminating and reducing overthinking. So Stop Overthinking, 23 Techniques to Relieve Stress, Stop Negative Spirals, Declutter Your Mind, and Focus on the Present by Nick Tretton provides really invaluable insights into what causes your mind to be filled with anxiety and stress. I really like the book because it contains many practical suggestions that you can use to help change your life and feel less anxious. I encourage you to check it out. I've used many of the things I've read in the book, and it's really helped me feel less anxious and feel more empowered, and I'm sure that it can help you as well. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful in terms of reducing your level of anxiety and worrying. Please click on the subscribe button so you'll be notified when I release future videos. I've also included links for other videos I think you might find helpful. Finally, remember, now is always the time to start making positive changes in your life. I'll see you next time.